Sherman tank, outmatched, outgunned. But it won the war. The 3rd Armored Division entered Normandy with 232 Sherman tanks. By the end of the European campaign, they'd lost 648 completely destroyed and another 700 knocked out and repaired. That's a loss rate of 580%. British soldiers called them Ronsons, like the lighter, because they light up the first time, every time. German crews joked they could brew tea on burning Shermans. American tankers knew the brutal math. It took 5 Shermans to knock out 1 German Panther. Yet this death trap won World War II. Nearly 50,000 Shermans rolled off American assembly lines between 1942 and 1945. They stormed Normandy beaches, liberated Paris, crossed the Rhine, and met Soviet forces at the Elbe. Decades later, upgraded versions were still destroying Soviet tanks in Israeli hands. How does a tank that's inferior in almost every measurable way become one of the most successful weapons in military history? The answer reveals something profound about how wars are actually won, and it's not what you think. June 1940, France falls in 6 weeks. The German Blitzkrieg, coordinated attacks by tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry, shatters the French army and the British Expeditionary Force. American military observers watch in horror as German panzer divisions demonstrate the future of warfare. The United States has a problem. Its best tank is the M2 Medium, armed with a 37mm pop gun and protected by armor thin enough that German anti-tank rifles can punch through it. America's entire tank fleet is obsolete overnight. The Army has no medium tanks capable of facing German panzers, and with war looking increasingly inevitable, there's no time for a leisurely development process. What happens next is unprecedented in military procurement. The M3 Grant, a stopgap design, goes from concept to production in months instead of years. It's better than nothing, but it's deeply flawed. The 75mm gun is mounted in a sponson on the hull side, meaning it can only traverse 15 degrees. In a tank battle, that's suicide. You have to turn your entire vehicle to aim at a target. But the M3 teaches American engineers something critical: how to mass-produce tanks quickly. Factories that once built locomotives and cars retool for armored vehicles. Supply chains for components are established. Quality control processes are developed. The M3 is a placeholder, but it's preparing America's industrial base for what comes next. September 1941. The first M4 Sherman prototype is completed at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. It takes everything learned from the M3 and fixes the fundamental problems. The 75mm gun is now in a fully rotating turret at the center of the vehicle. The crew can engage targets quickly and accurately. The armor is sloped for better protection. The design emphasizes reliability, simplicity, and ease of production. February 1942. Mass production begins. Multiple factories start churning out Shermans. In the first year alone, 25,000 Shermans are produced from 11 different plants. That's not a typo. 11 separate factories, each producing the same basic tank with slight variations based on available components and manufacturing capabilities. This is where American industrial philosophy diverges from everyone else. The Germans pursue perfection in individual vehicles. The Soviets pursue brutal simplicity in massive quantities. The Americans pursue something different: good enough, fast enough, and flexible enough to be produced anywhere by anyone. The Sherman weighs 33 tons, a third less than a Tiger. Its 75mm gun is decent but not exceptional. Its armor is moderate, but it has something revolutionary for 1942. It's reliable. The Ford GAA V8 engine doesn't break down constantly. The transmission works. The tracks don't fall off. When something does break, it can be repaired in the field with basic tools and readily available parts. November 1942. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. Shermans see their first combat against German forces at Kasserine Pass. The initial results are mixed. German Panzer IIIs and IVs are formidable opponents, but the Sherman holds its own. Its 75mm gun can penetrate German armor at combat ranges. Its speed and reliability give American crews tactical flexibility. The British, fighting alongside Americans with Lend-Lease Shermans, are impressed. They'd previously used the M3 Grant and found it undergunned, but were so pleased with its mechanical performance that they nicknamed it Honey. The Sherman is even better. British tankers appreciate that it actually works when you need it to work, a quality that should be basic but often isn't in 1942. Through 1943, the Sherman dominates in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. German Panzer IIIs and IVs are roughly equivalent opponents. The Sherman's superior reliability, combined with Allied air superiority and numerical advantage, gives American and British forces the edge. Tank versus tank combat is relatively rare anyway. Most Shermans spend their time supporting infantry, destroying fortifications, and engaging anti-tank guns. This is when American military doctrine makes a fateful decision. Tanks aren't meant to fight other tanks. That's the job of specialized tank destroyers. Shermans are infantry support vehicles. Their 75mm gun is perfectly adequate for destroying machine gun nests, bunkers, and light vehicles. If they encounter enemy tanks, they're supposed to call in tank destroyers or bypass and continue the advance. On paper, this makes sense. In practice, it's going to get a lot of tankers killed. Because while American doctrine ossifies, German tank design evolves rapidly. By late 1943, Germany is fielding the Panther, a 45-ton medium tank with sloped armor, a high-velocity 75mm gun that's vastly superior to the Sherman's weapon, and frontal armor the Sherman's gun can't penetrate at combat ranges. And the Tiger ER is appearing in greater numbers, 57 tons of armor and firepower that can destroy Shermans from distances where Shermans can't even hurt it. American tank designers propose upgunning the Sherman with a more powerful 76mm weapon. The Army initially resists. The 75mm is fine for infantry support. Tank destroyers will handle enemy armor. Besides, switching to a new gun would disrupt production, and production numbers are the priority. June 1944, D-Day, thousands of Shermans land on Normandy beaches. American, British, Canadian, and Free French forces all rely on the Sherman as their primary tank. The bocage country of Normandy, with its thick hedgerows, narrow lanes, and close-range combat, initially favors the defender. But Allied numbers and air superiority prevail. Then the Allies break out into open country. And that's when they start meeting Panthers and Tigers in significant numbers. And that's when American tankers learn a horrifying truth. They're outmatched. The math is brutal and simple. A Panther's 75mm gun can penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at 2,000 meters. A Sherman's 75mm gun can only penetrate a Panther's side armor at under 500 meters, and that's if you get a perfect 90-degree angle shot. Frontal armor? Forget it. The shell just bounces off. The Sherman ran on gasoline, not diesel. Combined with the ammunition stored inside, a penetrating hit could transform the tank into an inferno. Crews had seconds to escape before they burned alive. The nickname Ronson wasn't just dark humor, it was a trauma response to watching friends incinerate in steel coffins. Belton Cooper, an ordnance officer with the 3rd Armored Division, spent the war recovering and repairing knocked-out Shermans. His memoir, Death Traps, describes the nightmarish reality. Tanks with the turret blown completely off. Hulls split open by ammunition explosions. Crews carbonized beyond recognition. And the relentless cycle. Recover the destroyed tank, repair or replace it. Send it back into combat. Watch it get destroyed again. One Sherman commander describes the moment of truth. The hit comes low on the side. The interior lights up with a ball of fire from the friction of penetration. An 18-pound armor-piercing shell enters the ammunition storage. If you're lucky, the ammunition is stored in protected compartments. If you're not, the whole tank goes up. German Tiger crews report firing at Shermans from over a kilometer away, so far that Sherman crews can't even see them properly, and watching the American tanks explode one after another. Official Army guidelines stated that 5 Shermans were needed to knock out 1 Panther. 5 tanks. 5 crews of 5 men each. 25 lives to kill 1 enemy tank. The 76mm gun is finally rushed into production in late 1944. It helps, but not enough. The 76mm can penetrate Panther side armor at better ranges, but frontal armor is still dicey. And by now, Germany is fielding the Tiger II, the King Tiger, with armor so thick that even the 76mm gun is nearly useless, except at point-blank range. British forces come up with an ingenious modification, the Sherman Firefly. They rip out the 75mm gun and install the British 17-pounder, a high-velocity 76.2mm weapon that can actually hurt Panthers and Tigers. It's a game-changer. The Firefly can fight German heavy tanks on roughly equal terms, but production is limited and most Sherman crews are still stuck with inadequate weaponry. American tankers developed tactics to survive. Never engage German heavy tanks frontally. Use mobility to flank. Coordinate with artillery and air support. Attack in groups. If one Sherman dies drawing fire, maybe the others can get flanking shots. Infantry love having Shermans nearby because the armor blocks machine gun fire and the high explosive shells demolish German positions. But tankers know they're in death traps. Here's what nobody talks about when they obsess over tank versus tank combat statistics. That's not how wars are won. Tank duels make dramatic movie scenes, but they're relatively rare events in actual combat. The real war is fought through logistics, reliability, and the ability to maintain overwhelming force at the decisive point. And this is where the Sherman becomes unbeatable. A Tiger Y is an engineering marvel. Thick armor, powerful gun, sophisticated components. It's also a maintenance nightmare. The overlapping road wheel design traps mud and freezes solid in winter, immobilizing the tank. The engine requires constant attention. Parts are complex and supplies are limited. When a Tiger breaks down, which happens frequently, it often has to be abandoned because recovery vehicles can't tow 57 tons, and there are no spare parts to fix it. The Panther is even worse. Its final drive, the gears that transfer power from the transmission to the tracks, was designed for a 35-ton tank, but installed in a 45-ton vehicle. They break constantly. Early Panthers had catastrophic reliability problems. Later versions improved, but they still required meticulous maintenance and specialized parts. The Sherman? It works. The 4GAA engine is a modified aircraft engine built in massive quantities with parts widely available. The transmission is simple and robust. The suspension uses vertical vollet springs. Technology from the 1930s, unglamorous but nearly indestructible. When something breaks, any mechanic with basic tools can fix it, using parts that are always available because they're standardized across thousands of vehicles. The Sherman's production volume surpassed any other American tank, with 49,324 units built including various specialized variants. By comparison, Germany produced about 1,350 Tigers total, about 6,000 Panthers. The United States was building more Shermans every month than Germany could build Tigers in a year. But raw numbers only tell part of the story. The genius of the Sherman program is in the logistics. The Sherman can be transported by rail, by ship, by any standard military transport. It fits through standard bridges. It can ford rivers. It can operate for extended periods without maintenance. And when it does get knocked out, there's an entire system designed to recover and repair it. The U.S. Army develops an unprecedented tank recovery and repair system. Armored recovery vehicles pull damaged Shermans off the battlefield, sometimes under fire. Mobile maintenance units repair everything that can be fixed. Parts flow in endless supply. A Sherman knocked out in combat can be back in action within days. A destroyed Sherman can be replaced with a new one from the production line within weeks. German tanks, by contrast, are often abandoned when they break down because there's no way to recover them or no parts to fix them. By 1944, Germany's fuel shortage means tanks are often immobilized, not by enemy action, but by empty fuel tanks. The vaunted Panthers and Tigers become static pillboxes, waiting for Allied forces to bypass or destroy them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A Sherman that's actually on the battlefield, running, shooting, and supporting infantry, is infinitely more valuable than a Tiger that's sitting in a repair depot, waiting for parts that will never arrive, or a Panther that broke down 50 kilometers from the front and had to be abandoned. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major offensive. They commit their best remaining armored forces, including significant numbers of Panthers and King Tigers. On paper, these are vastly superior to the Shermans defending the Ardennes. The Germans initially achieve surprise and make significant gains. Sherman units take heavy losses. But then American logistics kick in. Replacement tanks arrive. Replacement crews arrive. Ammunition replenishment continues despite the crisis. Within days, American forces have more tanks in the battle than they started with, because they can replace losses faster than they take them. German forces, meanwhile, are running out of fuel. Literally running out. King Tigers, the most powerful tanks on the battlefield, are abandoned by their crews because there's no fuel to move them. Immobilized, they become targets for Allied fighter bombers or infantry with bazookas. The offensive collapses not because German tanks are inferior, but because German logistics are non-existent. This pattern repeats across the entire Western Front. German units with superior tanks find themselves surrounded, cut off, and unable to sustain operations. American units with inferior Shermans maintain continuous operations because supplies never stop flowing. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, replacement vehicles, replacement crews. The American war machine just keeps grinding forward. By early 1945, the qualitative advantage of German tanks is completely irrelevant. By the time of the Bulge, the number of Shermans in Europe alone outnumbered total German tank production for the entire war. Every American infantry division has an attached Sherman battalion. There are 65 independent American Sherman tank battalions. The Germans simply cannot compete with these numbers, regardless of individual tank quality. And here's something that often gets overlooked: crew training and doctrine. By 1945, American tank crews have months of training, tactical doctrine that emphasizes combined arms operations, and experienced leaders who've survived multiple engagements. German crews, by contrast, are increasingly composed of hastily trained replacements thrown into combat with minimal preparation. The best German tankers, the aces with dozens of kills, are either dead or too few to matter. A well-trained American crew in a Sherman, working with infantry, artillery, and air support, can defeat a poorly trained German crew in a Panther. Not through superior equipment, but through superior tactics, coordination, and sustained operational capability. The Sherman's true advantage isn't in the tank itself, it's in the system surrounding the tank. The maintenance, the supply chain, the training pipeline, the tactical doctrine, the combined arms integration. You can't separate the Sherman from American industrial and military power. They're part of the same weapon system. May 1945. Germany surrenders. The Sherman has been in every major American engagement: North Africa, Sicily, Italy, Normandy, the liberation of France, the drive into Germany. Shermans served not only with the United States, but also with Great Britain, the Free French, China, and even the Soviet Union in all combat theaters. No other tank in history saw such widespread use. But the story doesn't end with World War II. The Sherman continues fighting for decades. Korea 1950, Shermans faced Soviet-built T-34/85s in the first major tank battles of the Cold War era. The Sherman holds its own, benefiting from better crew training and improved ammunition. The Israeli Defense Forces take Sherman warfare to another level. In the 1950s and 60s, Israel acquires hundreds of Shermans and begins modernizing them. They replace the gasoline engines with diesel engines from captured Arab tanks, improving reliability and reducing fire risk. They upgun them with French 75mm and later 105mm guns. They add modern fire control systems. These Super Shermans fight in the 1967 Six-Day War, and they win. Against Soviet T-54s and T-55s, tanks designed in the 1950s and technically superior to the World War II-era Sherman, the heavily modified Israeli Shermans prove competitive. Superior crew training, better tactics, and smart modifications overcome the age of the basic design. The Sherman fights again in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. By now, they're clearly obsolete, but they still see combat. Some remain in service with smaller nations into the 1980s. The final combat use of a Sherman variant is recorded in the 1990s. That's over 50 years of active service, a testament to the fundamental soundness of the design. What made the Sherman special wasn't any single characteristic. It was the combination: good enough firepower, adequate protection, excellent reliability, ease of production, simple maintenance, and availability in overwhelming numbers. It was a weapon system designed not for individual supremacy, but for systematic victory. The Germans built tanks that were works of art, over-engineered, expensive, deadly in the right hands. The Soviets built tanks that were brutally simple, crude but effective, produced in staggering quantities. The Americans built tanks that were products, reliable, maintainable, replaceable, and good enough to get the job done when backed by superior logistics and industrial capacity. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II. By 1944, it wasn't even close. But it was the right tank for the war America had to fight, and that's what matters. Here's the lesson the Sherman teaches. Wars aren't won by wonder weapons. They're won by logistics, industrial capacity, reliable equipment, trained personnel, and the ability to maintain sustained operations. The Sherman embodies all of these principles. Yes, American tankers died in Shermans. The 580% loss rate of the 3rd Armored Division is real and horrifying. Every one of those losses represents 5 men at risk, 5 families potentially devastated. We shouldn't romanticize or minimize that sacrifice. But we also shouldn't misunderstand what the Sherman accomplished. It carried Allied armies from the beaches of North Africa to the heart of Berlin. It gave infantry support when they needed it most. It provided mobile firepower that could reach the battlefield, stay there, and fight effectively. It could be produced in quantities that made American armored superiority inevitable. The Sherman won through availability, through reliability, through the unglamorous but essential quality of actually working when needed. A perfect tank that's in a repair depot is worthless. A mediocre tank that's on the battlefield fighting is invaluable. Modern military planners still grapple with this lesson. Do you build a smaller number of sophisticated, expensive, high-capability weapons? Or do you build larger numbers of simpler, cheaper, good-enough weapons? The F-35 versus F-16 debate echoes the Pershing versus Sherman debate of World War II. The Sherman suggests the answer. You build what you can produce, maintain, and deploy in sufficient quantities to achieve operational objectives. Perfection is the enemy of good enough when good enough wins wars. Today, museum Shermans sit in dozens of countries. Veterans associations still gather around them. Former tankers sharing stories of machines that caught fire too easily, guns that couldn't penetrate enemy armor, and endless frustrations with equipment that felt inadequate. But they also share stories of tanks that started every morning, that could be repaired by the crew that brought them home. The Sherman was outmatched by German heavy tanks, outgunned by Panthers and Tigers, more vulnerable to fire than diesel-powered Soviet designs, inferior on paper in almost every measurable way, and it won the war. Because winning wars isn't about having the best equipment, it's about having enough equipment that actually works, backed by the logistics to keep it working, and the industrial capacity to replace it when it doesn't. That's the real story of the Sherman. Not a death trap, not a wonder weapon, just a good enough tank produced in staggering quantities that got the job done when it mattered most. If this deep dive into the most paradoxical weapon of World War II grabbed you, that like helps others discover these stories. Subscribe for more explorations of military equipment that succeeded despite or because of their limitations. What other World War II debates should I tackle? Was the B-17 Flying Fortress actually a flying fortress? Did the Jeep win the war more than any tank? Was the M1 Garand really the weapon that won? Drop your suggestions below. Every comment influences what comes next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next historical controversy.